You're listening to the Touch 'em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and on today's episode, we have UFC Fight Night Dolidze versus Imavov live from the UFC Apex next Saturday, February 3rd at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. In the main event of the evening, you have a pivotal bout between the top 15 ranked fighters in the 185-pound middleweight division, between the number 8 ranked Roman Dolidze taking on the number 11 ranked Nassourdine Imavov. And then in the co-main event of the evening, you have a battle in the lightweight division between top 15 ranked contenders in the number 13 ranked Renato Moicano or Money Moicano taking on the number 15 ranked knockout puncher in Drew Dober. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. All right, everybody. UFC Fight Night Dolidze versus Imavov. This is an early breakdown. Probably should have done this next week, but we're going to get this done early because we do have a break week with no fights this upcoming Saturday. But looking at this card from a betting perspective, from an overall perspective, I think there's a lot of decent fights. I just think that this card lacks name value. So a lot of people aren't really going to be tuning in, which is better for you if you're on the betting side because probably going to be less eyes on it from the betting market as well, unless it's on the main card. But in my opinion, I think the most money is made on the prelims. Maybe I'm wrong, and you can correct me or give me your opinion on that as well in the description of this video if you're watching it on YouTube, or you can send me a message through the podcast platform, whether you use Anchor, Apple, whatever. You can leave a comment and give me your opinions on that as well. But pretty decent card. You have the rebooking of Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikov. Viviane Araujo versus Natalia Silva is a great fight. Moicano Dober, Imavov Dolidze. You have the second UFC outing for Aliaskab Kizriev taking on Mahmoud Muradov. I'm a big Muradov fan, but I think he's got a tough outing in this fight. Gilbert Urbina. You've got Charles Johnson and Azat Maxim, which I think is going to be a very competitive fight. Blake Bilder and Jingyong Lee. I think that's going to be a really solid fight. Very competitive matchup overall. I think they might be giving one side a little bit too much love just watching the tape. And then Landon Quinones and Markel Medeiros. All right, so let's kick it off. We'll start it. First fight up, Thomas Peterson versus Jamal Pogues. I'm going to be honest, I didn't watch tape on this fight. I didn't really go into it well. The only thing I know is that the footwork, the movement, the speed, the boxing combinations of Pogues are pretty good. I mean, he uses his hands pretty well. He's a pretty decent boxer, and he moves pretty fluently for this division, considering he's a heavyweight. But this is a low-level heavyweight fight. This is a fight that I don't think anybody should spend a whole lot of time on breaking down tape, breaking down film. I don't really think there's a whole lot to see here, whether it's from a betting side or from an actual technical mixed martial arts perspective. If we look at the odds on this fight, we've got, let's see, give me 1 second. We'll pull it up here on DraftKings. Let's see. It's not even going to give me an option. All right, let's search it up. MMA. UFC. Thomas Peterson minus 170, Jamal Pogues plus 142. I would say that's about right. Like I said, it's low-level heavyweight fights. I think this is kind of a coin flip. I'm going to go with Thomas Peterson just because I haven't seen too much that I've liked out of Jamal Pogues. I believe Thomas Peterson was on the Contender Series. I believe he had decent wrestling, good top control, decent ability to look for submissions. Like I said, I could be wrong because I didn't watch tape, but I'll go with the side of the underdog, with the favorite in Thomas Peterson. But again, I would stay away from it, and it's not a fight that I'm really looking forward to from a technical perspective either. All right, up next, a fight I actually did watch tape on. A pretty decent matchup here between Landon Quinones and Markel Medeiros. Quinones comes in 7 victories, 2 losses, 1 no contest. Last fight was a decision loss to, who was it? Who did he have that fight with? with? Nasrat Haqparast. Okay, yeah. The name was escaping me. So Nasrat Haqparast and Landon Quinones. Man, for how good of a boxer Haqparast is, Quinones gave him everything he could handle. I mean, he was in his face. He was throwing good kick combinations, punctuating his combinations with kicks, chopping that lead leg, killing the lead leg of Haqparast in that southpaw stance, coming back with good boxing combinations. And then Haqparast obviously came back and beat him up with the volume, landed big shots up to the volume the longer the fight went, and eventually won the fight by decision. But I think that was a fight that a lot of people thought Quinones was just kind of the lamb being led to the slaughter, so to speak. And I think Quinones showed a lot of promise in that fight. Decent boxing combinations, good movement, a lot of stance changes between orthodox and southpaw, mid combination stance changes. He puts things together. He stays calm in the fire even when he does get hit, tries to guard up, come back with good counters. Markel Medeiros, a guy I didn't know too much of going into the Contender Series, and a guy I faded going into the Contender Series against Issa Isakov. Markel Medeiros, man, this guy doesn't have too much experience, but he's got big power. He's pretty technical on the feet. He moves well. He's very fluent with his stance changes between orthodox and southpaw. And the one thing I do like a lot about Medeiros is his ability to use his feints. He's always feinting with his hands. He's always feinting with his hips, moving them around. And it gives the opponent the illusion that you're not really going to do anything. And even if you are, they can't really decide where the attack's going to come from. Are you moving your shoulders and your hands so that you can pop them with a jab? Are you moving your shoulders and your hands and your hips so that you could feint and throw a low kick? Are you feinting to throw a knee? Are you feinting to stance change? It just kind of overloads the hard drive of your opponent and makes it harder for them to develop a game plan for whatever you're trying to use. So that's something I do really like. He almost got taken down on the Contender Series, but he used a good whizzer, used that little shelf with the shin against the thigh of the opponent, pushed off and was able to break away, work his way back up off the cage, circle back to the center. He's very calm, very patient. Now, he did get knocked out on the regional scene, got clipped with a big shot, hurt, then got dropped and got finished off with ground and pound. So we know that this guy can be finished. He does have some chin concerns because he did get knocked out on the regional scene. Landon Quinones is a guy who's never been finished or never been knocked out, and I expect this to be more of a stand-up battle. I think the longer this fight plays out, midpoint of the second round into the third round, it would probably favor a guy like Quinones, based on the fact that he has the higher level of competition experience, just mainly going off of that last performance against Nasrat Haqparast, who isn't at the top of the division, but he's definitely in the heap of that 155-pound division. I think the later portions of this fight would go to Quinones. I would expect him to have the cardio advantage, the volume advantage, and just the overall, just really getting up on the numbers over 15 minutes. And I think that the experience advantage really plays in his factor. But early on, I think Medeiros has a lot of promise. Now, you got to be careful because we've done this so many times with guys on the Contender Series where you back them, you bet them heavy, they look like a world beater on the Contender, and then they go to the UFC and that higher level of experience, keyword experience, that these guys that they're fighting have ends up showing through and they get caught, like Tom Nolan with Nicholas Mota, Juliana Miller against Veronica Hardy. There's a bunch of different examples of this that we've seen inside of the UFC, and it's even become a thing where it's the Contender Series fade. They look amazing, they look like a world beater, then they go to the UFC and it just doesn't work out for them. I thought for sure Tom Nolan was going to knock out Nicholas Mota, but it was a firefight and Mota got there first. Boom, big left hook, knocked them out. I think Quinones, like I said, later on in the fight, he's going to have the advantage. Early on, I like what Medeiros has to offer. I like his boxing. I like his low kicks. He's got very good calf kicks, very good low kicks. The fluidity of his stance changes and the footwork and the movement. I think the biggest difference in this fight is the mobility of Medeiros, but not just the mobility in terms of the footwork, the upper trunk movement, the mobility, the fakes, the feints. I think it's going to kind of overload a guy like Quinones and get him to overcommit on a shot. And I think the counter game of Markel Medeiros is going to be there. He puts his boxing combinations together well. He's got those knees up the middle, good calf kicks. He's just a very solid, seasoned kickboxer, at least from what I can see. He doesn't overcommit on a lot of his punches and leave his chin exposed. He doesn't wind up and throw big looping haymakers. He finds his shots, he puts them together, and he trains out of Factory X Muay Thai alongside Coach Mark Montoya. I think that those guys are going to give him a good look for a style like Quinones, and I think we're going to get a finish, a knockout finish from the Contender Series fighter in Markel Medeiros. He's a guy I will be looking to play on the betting market when we get closer to fight night. Obviously not this weekend, but next weekend. I like everything that he has to offer. Being knocked out on the Contender Series, it does worry me, or not on the Contender Series. Being knocked out on the regional scene does worry me because I do think Quinones, like I said, with that experience advantage, might be able to drown him in the second and in the third round. But I think those calf kicks, the low kicks are going to be there early. He's going to be able to find his range, and I think he lands a big left hook on the chin of landing Quinones. It's either going to be a left hook or it's going to be a feint hook into that knee like he knocked out his opponent on the Contender Series with. Give me Markel Medeiros to get a knockout victory in his UFC debut against Landon Quinones via second round left hook, or a left hook in the second round. Odds on that fight, we'll just discuss it really quick. Medeiros is the favorite at minus 162. He was as high as minus 175, minus 180. So it looks like after that performance against Haqparast, money's coming in on the side of Quinones. I'm going to still stick with my gut and go with Markel Medeiros. And I think at minus 162, he's a solid play. I would look at Medeiros by knockout, Medeiros inside the distance, or Medeiros money line if you're looking for a parlay. Up next, Luana Carolina taking on Julija Stoliarenko. We know Stoliarenko, she's knockout or bust. I think Luana Carolina has more to offer in terms of her overall mixed martial arts game, but there's always that chance Stoliarenko gets that takedown, finds the arm, and gets that armbar submission. She's the wish version of a Ronda Rousey inside of the UFC, and I don't think anybody would sit here and disagree with me on that front. Luana Carolina has good striking. She moves in and out well. She puts her combinations together. She's going to be the much better fighter on the feet than Stoliarenko. We'll look at her most recent fights. We'll pull them up very quickly. Let's see. Luana Carolina. She has a win over Ivana Petrovic via unanimous decision. Lost a split decision to Joanne Wood. Lost via spinning elbow knockout to Molly McCann in the third round. I believe that was in London. We'll talk about Molly McCann a little bit later. I think that this fight should go to Luana Carolina just because we know the type of fighter that Stoliarenko is. Stoliarenko is, like we said, pretty much an armbar or bust type of fighter. And if she can't get that takedown, if she can't get the submission, then you're kind of in a position where you have to go with the other fighter. Luana Carolina only has one loss by submission, 2 losses by decision, and 1 by KO. The KO coming to Luana Carolina. She's got 3 finishes, 6 wins by decision. So we know that the longer this fight goes, it's more than likely going to go towards the way of Luana Carolina, because that probably means Stoliarenko hasn't gotten the takedowns. She hasn't been able to use those hip tosses and throws and hasn't been able to lock up that armbar submission if she does get Carolina down to the ground. I mean, 10 out of the 11 wins for Stoliarenko come by way of submission. I believe most of them are by armbar. Yeah, armbar. Armbar. Yeah, she's the wish version of a Ronda Rousey. Probably a more well-rounded fighter than Rousey was back in the day, I'll be honest, just because it's a different level of MMA at this point. But out of her 7 losses, she's been finished 4 times. So we know that if she can't get those takedowns and she can't get that armbar submission early, then most of the time she's going to end up giving up rounds and she's going to end up getting outstruck on the feet. She's been submitted before. She got submitted by Julia Avila by a 3rd round rear naked choke. She loses by decision. She got knocked out in the 1st round by Chelsea Chandler, but a lot of her arm bars come in the 1st round. Molly McCann, round 1. Jessica Rose Clark, round 1. Round 1 in 20 seconds, round 1 in 19 seconds, round 1 in 30 seconds, round 1 in 40 seconds. She's going to be looking to crash the pocket, get into a car crash early, hip toss, hip throw, and look for the armbar. If she doesn't get the armbar early, this fight goes to Luana Carolina. And when you're giving me, I believe it's minus 120, plus 110, pretty much even money at this point on this fight, Let's see. Plus 102, Luana Carolina, minus 122, Stoliarenko. If you play Stoliarenko, I mean, it's pretty clear that it's going to be round one submission. Stoliarenko by sub, Stoliarenko round one armbar, or Stoliarenko round one submission. That's pretty much going to be what we're expecting from a fighter like Stoliarenko. When you look at Carolina, she has the cardio, she has the pace, she's going to have the better striking, she has the more well-rounded game. It's just, can she stop the takedown? Can she stop the armbar? I'm going to go with the fact that she can stop it, and she'll be able to keep the fight at distance and at range and eventually get a late TKO or a potential decision win. Give me the underdog in Luana Dread Carolina to get another win here over Julia Stoliarenko. I'll go Luana Carolina, late second round TKO. I just think she has more to offer, and in the game of MMA, she has way more weapons. So second round TKO, Luana Carolina. Up next, we've got a battle in the featherweight division between Jingyong Lee and Blake Bilder. This is a fight I see a lot of people on the side of the road to the UFC winner in Jingyong Lee. And don't get me wrong, this guy has a very well-rounded game. He's a very good striker. He has decent takedown defense. He keeps good pace. His cardio is good for 3 rounds. But I think there's a lot of disrespect coming in on the side of Blake Bilder because of that performance in his last fight against Kyle Nelson. A lot of people expected Blake Bilder to walk in there and either submit or TKO a guy like Kyle Nelson. And Kyle Nelson's been a guy who's proved multiple people wrong, not only in his fight against Blake Bilder, but against another UFC prospect in Fernando Padilla in Mexico City. He was able to find a way to win that fight by decision with good footwork, good movement, good boxing, and good kicks to the end to end his combinations with. I think Jingyong Lee is the faster striker. I think he has more power on the feet. I think he's got better footwork, and I think he's just more comfortable overall getting into striking exchanges. Bilder can strike. He's a good boxer. He uses good lateral movement. He cuts angles well. He uses a lot of lateral movement, in and out movement. Good 1-2 down the middle. A beautiful check left hook. I think that's going to be one of the best weapons for a guy like Blake Bilder in this fight, is to use that lateral movement, fight in and out, use those outside low kicks and inside low kicks, check hook, and then try to level change and get the takedown. Jingyong Lee isn't the easiest guy to take down, but we saw in his road to UFC win, he got taken down. He got controlled. He got, out positioned and out pointed on the mat the later the fight went. He got taken down multiple times in that fight, which is why I'm surprised so many people are on his side going into this fight. I think they're taking that loss to Kyle Nelson and just giving it way too much stock in the overall game and perception of Blake Bilder as a mixed martial artist. This guy has good footwork. He has good check hooks. He uses good lateral movement, uses 1-2s, good inside and outside low kicks, and he can use his wrestling. He can use takedowns. Now, he had trouble getting takedowns against Kyle Nelson and did get outstruck. Now, Jingyong Lee is a very tall, long, lanky fighter, but I do feel like Blake Bilder will be able to get on the inside. I do think he can compete with Jingyong Lee if he can get on the inside and close it off into the boxing range. And I know Jingyong Lee, great boxer, good 1-2, slick combinations, gets better as the fight goes. I would say the third round cardio advantage would probably go to Jingyong Lee, but early on in the fight, I think Blake Bilder's live to get those takedowns. I think he's live to control Jingyong Lee on the mat. I think he's live to go for submissions, live to look for ground and pound, and he's a competent striker. Everybody's taking that Kyle Nelson fight and just making Blake Bilder out to be this terrible fighter. Was his UFC debut against Shane Young a close fight? Yeah, 100%. It was close. Is Shane Young the best fighter on the roster? No. So that doesn't look the best for Blake Bilder, but it was a different style of matchup. And I think Blake Bilder knows that he's going to have that grappling, wrestling, top control, jiu-jitsu advantage against a fighter like Jingyong Lee. Now, if he stays at range, he's probably going to get picked apart. But if he can close the distance, if he can get into those clinches, into the over-unders, get the takedowns, look for submissions, look to get to the full mount, land ground and pound, even stay in the boxing range, I think he can piece up Jingyong Lee because Jingyong Lee doesn't have the best defense. That guy keeps his head on the center line for the most part as well because he is a tall, long, lanky fighter. But on the inside, I think Bilder can catch him with a check hook. He can catch him with an overhand. He can catch him with that 1-2. Bilder knows how to strike, and he knows how to move with the footwork, the movement. His defense isn't the best. I would say if he's going to get caught with something, it's probably going to be an overhand or an uppercut from Lee. But I think those takedowns are going to be there, and I'm going to take Blake Builder as the slight underdog to get a submission over Jing Young Lee. It's not the fight I'm supremely confident in. It's not a fight that I would tell you to rush to go bet on, because I do think it is close and competitive, and I think if the fight stays at a distance, that yes, Jing Young Lee can outstrike a guy like Builder with his kicks, with his, just overall reach advantage. But I think the fighter with more experience, the fighter with better competition, and the fighter who has more ways to win is Blake Builder. So give me the underdog again. Give me Blake Builder at plus 114 to get the job done via a second round rear naked choke submission. I could see a ground and pound TKO. I could see him catching him on the feet, but give me Blake Builder for a round 2 finish as the plus 115 underdog. Up next in the welterweight division, you've got Themba Gorimbo taking on Pete Rodriguez. Listen, we can't really take too much from the game of Pete Rodriguez because he got a knockout, but it was over Mike Jackson, a guy who's not a real mixed martial artist. Themba Gorimbo should run through a guy like Rodriguez as long as he doesn't get into clinch range and doesn't get into boxing range. Dirty boxing, overhands, uppercuts up the middle, knees, anything in close that doesn't have Pete Rodriguez having to close that distance. If he already gives him that distance by getting in too close, unless he's just able to get that body lock, hide his head, and get those takedowns, you don't want to be in close against a fighter like Pete Rodriguez. I mean, the guy has good knockout power. He has decent boxing. He puts his hands and combinations together well. I will say he definitely has the power advantage in this spot against Themba Gorimbo, but Themba Gorimbo is a very tall, long, rangy striker. We know he has power. He dropped Takashi Sato with a big right hand right down the middle, almost knocked him out. He got takedowns. He controlled him from the top position. He knows how to fight on the inside. He knows how to control the legs and wrap up your legs if he gets the takedowns. He is the much more well-rounded fighter than Pete Rodriguez. But the way Pete Rodriguez wins this fight is by making it a dirty, nasty, in-close, dirty boxing up against the cage, elbows, knees, boxing range, uppercuts, overhands. He just has to close that distance and make this a nasty, dirty fight. I do think Pete Rodriguez is live to get a knockout here. I think if you're on the side of Rodriguez, you probably would want to take him first round KO, because I think if it goes past that first round, if he's not able to get the knockout early, he's going to get picked apart and he's going to end up getting submitted or TKO'd by Themba Gorimbo in the process. I 100% believe that Gorimbo is just a better fighter. He's much better at range. He mixes things up better. He's got the better wrestling. He's got the better top control. He's going to have the better jiu-jitsu and control from the top position. And that's just the fighter that Themba Gorimbo is. He's going to be able to out-technique, out-point, out-crisp Pete Rodriguez, and in the process, probably get a finish by being able to land strikes that Rodriguez just isn't able to see. But early on, I mean, he's going to be at a huge height disadvantage. 4-inch height disadvantage, 6-inch reach disadvantage. The game for Gorimbo is to keep it at kicking range, right outside of kicking range, throw those teeps, throw those front kicks, throw the 1-2s, check hooks, knees up the middle when Pete Rodriguez tries to close the distance, but be sure to guard up because you don't want Rodriguez to come in on the knee and throw that big overhand right, which maybe he can catch a tall, lanky guy like Gorimbo with. Pete Rodriguez is live for a knockout here, but that's not something I would tell you that I have supreme confidence in, but he is live in round 1 to get a KO. I don't think that's anything short of possible in this spot, but I think Gorimbo is just going to be able to keep it at range, keep it at distance. We know that Pete Rodriguez doesn't have the best durability either, so aside from a first-round Hail Mary KO, I think those front kicks to the body, the teeps, the inside and outside low kicks, the overhands and things like that are going to be able to pick apart Rodriguez and eventually cause him to get dropped and then submitted. I'm going to go with Themba Gorimbo to defeat Pete Rodriguez via second round rear naked choke submission. Maybe a guillotine, but I think he works the body, works the legs, and just slows him down, puts him out, like breaks him down, and then eventually grabs his neck and gets a sub. So give me Themba Gorimbo, second round rear naked choke submission. All right, up next, you've got a battle between the undefeated Azat Maxim coming in off of his first fight in the UFC that he was able to win via decision at 17 wins and no losses, taking on Charles Energy Johnson, 13-6 overall, coming off of that decision loss to Rafael Estevam, but a very, very close matchup where it looked like Johnson was going to be able to TKO him towards the end portion of the third round. We know what Azat Maxim, his path of least resistance is going to be. Getting in the face of Johnson, getting the takedowns, controlling from the top, landing ground and pound, not allowing Johnson to get back up. If he gets back up, hit him with a mat return and just continue to rinse and repeat with the grappling, top control pressure, and looking to set up submissions. If he's able to continuously get those takedowns and top control, then Johnson's going to lose this fight. He's either going to get ground and pounded, he's going to get submitted, or he's going to lose by decision. But the thing with Azat Maxim is he has good striking. It's decent. But I feel like everything that he throws, he kind of puts a little bit too much into it. Like he'll throw a big left hook, a big uppercut, a big 1-2, but it just looks kind of stiff and awkward when he throws his combinations. He's got good kicks. I would say the leg kicks, the body kicks, they're decent. But when he throws his boxing, I don't think he wants to get into a boxing match with Johnson because Johnson is the much cleaner, slicker striker, especially with the boxing. If he stands and trades with Charles Johnson for, 2 or 3 rounds, I think he can get clipped. I think he can get finished. I think he can get pieced up in the boxing. He can get pieced up on the feet. I would not be surprised. Like I said, the path of least resistance is for Azat Maxim to get those takedowns, get that top control, look for submissions, and try to either submit Charles Johnson, ground and pound TKO him, or win by decision. But I think this is another guy where he's undefeated on the regional scene, undefeated in another country, and he has a lot of hype coming in. I don't think the hype matches up with Azat Maxim. Would I be surprised if he wins? No, because of the type of fighter that he is. But he likes to strike. He likes to wrestle. He likes to get those takedowns, look for submissions, ground and pound. Like, he is a well-rounded fighter. But I think Charles Johnson might have too much experience for him. That's something that we've talked about a few times on this podcast already, the word experience. I think Johnson may have too big of an experience advantage for Azat Maxim in that third round, in the late portions of the second round. If there's a late finish in this fight, I am 75 to 80% sure that it comes from the side of the inner G in Charles Johnson with a second round TKO, a third round TKO. He has a lot of ninja chokes, a lot of Darce chokes. I could see him surviving the early wrestling, early submissions, early takedowns, and being able to kind of slow down Maxim and eventually get a round 2 or round 3 submission. He almost got it in his last fight against Cody Durden. Or I'm sorry, second to last fight against Cody Durden. He almost was able to lock up a Darce choke, but he was able to get out of it. But it was close, and I actually had a bet on Johnson by sub there because the numbers were so off. But when you look at Maxim, let's check to see who his first UFC fight was because the name is skipping me right now. Tyson Nam? Yeah. Okay, so Tyson Nam. So he beat Tyson Nam via split decision. But it was a close fight, man. Nam was finding his range. He was finding his distance. And the longer the fight went, he was landing good shots to the body. He was landing big overhand rights. The guy is there to get hit. Maxim is there to get hit. He does not have that good of defense. He leaves his head on the center line. He's very tall, long, rangy, lanky guy. Yes, he can take the shots, but I think Johnson, he doesn't hit as hard as a guy like Tyson Nam, but I feel like his angles, his footwork, his stance changes, the little angle shifts, the angles that his shots come from are going to be a lot harder for a guy like Maxim to see when we get into the later rounds. Obviously, Maxim going to be live for those takedowns, going to be live for submissions. The most takedowns in this fight are going to come from Maxim. It's just going to be a fact of, can he push back Johnson? Can he get those takedowns? Can he control him for the majority of the fight? Johnson's not a guy I would be confident betting on in any fight, whether betting against him or betting for him, because a guy like Johnson is either he shows up or he doesn't. And every single fight that he has, if it's not him finishing Jimmy Flick, it's a very close fight, and it's usually a coin flip. I thought he won the fight against Ode Osborne. They gave it to Osborne, but I believe it was a split decision. Rafael Estevam won the first 2 rounds, but third round got dominated, and maybe it could have been a draw. Maybe they could have given Johnson a 10-8, 2 rounds to 1, but a 10-8 in the 1 round. Johnson's very good. He's got a lot of experience. He can grapple. He can look for submissions, decent takedown defense, a good ability to work his way back up to the feet. I think that's going to be the biggest thing in this fight against Maxim is, will he be able to use butterflies, the underhooks, use the single leg butterfly sweep, work his way back up to the feet, get back to the center, and start to be able to outstrike him. The one thing I do worry about is that if Maxim's able to get those takedowns over and over and over again, Will it stop Johnson from being able to commit on his strikes, which is going to allow for Maxim to be able to outstrike him because of the hesitancy on the side of Charles Johnson? I'm going to pick the underdog in Charles Johnson at a plus 160. I just feel like he has more to offer, and I wasn't very impressed with Maxim in his first fight in the UFC. He did win it, but it was very close. I think I think it was the right decision. I think Maxim won. I think it was 2 rounds to 1, but I'm still not super impressed. And I just feel like I've seen a little bit more from Johnson, even though he's a big question mark when it comes to how he's going to perform and how close his fights usually are. Maybe take the fight ends by split decision. I could see this going to the scorecards and being a split with maybe Johnson coming on big in the 3rd round and the 1st round goes to Maxim. 2nd round's kind of a toss up. But I'm going to take Charles Johnson to win via a 3rd round TKO. I could see a decision, but I feel like Johnson can break this guy down the stretch in the 3rd round. So give me Charles Johnson, 3rd round TKO over Azat Maxim. Up next, a women's strawweight bout between Meatball Molly McCann taking on Diana Belbita. The Diana Belbita and Karolina Kowalkiewicz fight was... I picked Belbita as a dog there, and she got beat. She lost. Had decent moments throughout, but, just didn't really show up in that fight. I feel like Belbita either shows up and looks really good and is able to keep fighters at a distance, keep them at range, use that long jab, put her strikes together, and pick apart the fighter, or eventually just gets, slowed down, gets hit, doesn't have the best defense, and she's kind of a question mark. Molly McCann is also a question mark because she's not that great of a fighter. Like, as an overall mixed martial artist, the Meatball Molly McCann isn't the best. She's not the best technically. She doesn't have the really good technique. She's not a good striker. She just has big power in her punches, big spinning elbows, big overhands, big hooks. Like, she has a lot more power than Belbita, but Belbita has more finesse and she's more technically sound than McCann. But even in the fight against Kowalkiewicz, leading up to the fight, Belbita looked more technical, more sharp, cleaner. But in the fight, she throws her punches from such awkward angles, and her strikes don't look clean either. On pads, when she's training, she looks very clean, very crisp. Her punches look quick, crisp, clean, not a ton of windup. But in the fight, she kind of just throws looping punches, overhands, uppercuts, and doesn't look the best when she's trying to put everything together. I think this is a very close fight. This is another fight that I wouldn't bet on, but if I was going to bet on it, I think I would take a shot on the underdog in Diana Belbita. I know they fought before. I know McCann won via unanimous decision. McCann's going to be the more aggressive fighter. She's going to look to close the distance. She's going to look to get those takedowns. She's going to look to control. But something's telling me that Belbita is going to make some adjustments. She's going to be keeping McCann at a distance, keeping her at range, using her long strikes, the teeps, the inside and outside low kicks, the 1-2s, trying to land knees to the body, look to use some takedown defense, get some takedowns of her own because McCann isn't too much of a submission threat. It's more her getting caught in submissions. I'm going to side with the underdog in Belbita at plus 215. I'm not like supremely confident in it. Again, this isn't a fight I would really bet on, but I don't really think either of these girls are that good. But I've seen a little bit more technically and a little bit more to offer in terms of overall MMA game from the side of Diana Belbita, and I feel like she's just a little bit sharper than a girl like McCann. Could McCann clip her with a spinning elbow, land a big hook, get takedowns and top control? Yes, of course. I would not be surprised if Molly McCann wins, but I'm going to go with the underdog in Diana Belbita. I feel like she's going to be able to keep McCann at a distance and just outpoint her. I don't necessarily think we're going to see a finish. I don't think McCann gets TKO'd. I think if there is a finish, it probably comes on the side of McCann, maybe dropping Belbita with a big body shot and then jumping on her and finishing her, because we've seen a higher finishing instinct and upside from the side of the Meatball. But I'll go with Belbita by decision. I think she's going to be able to keep her at the distance she wants to, use those long, rangy strikes, jabs, inside low kicks, outside low kicks, front kicks, knees to the body, and just kind of pick her apart and piece her up over 15 minutes. So give me Diana Belbita via unanimous decision. We'll go split decision. I think it'll be close. Diana Belbita via 29-28 split decision over the Meatball, Molly McCann. All right, up next, you've got a battle in the UFC's welterweight division between Gilbert Urbina, the finalist on The Ultimate Fighter, taking on Charles Radke, or Charlie Radke, training out of VFS, I believe, over here in Chicago, Illinois. Radke versus Urbina is a really solid fight, and I'm gonna just break it down. Obviously, that's what we do on this podcast, but I feel like this fight is more interesting on like when you really think about it than it is on paper. Because most people might just look at this fight and be like, I don't really care about this main card opener. It doesn't really matter. But man, this is going to be an interesting one because of the way that both men fight. I would say that the more aggressive fighter, the fighter with higher finishing potential, the fighter with the ability to win by knockout or submission, and you know, the higher likelihood of a finish is on the side of Urbina in the former Ultimate Fighter finalist. Urbina is very good with his striking. He moves very well. He uses teeps, uses elbows, uses knees. He can rip teeps to the body like you saw him hurt Orion Kosei with. He's got good boxing. He moves well on the feet, but he also has good wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to fall back on. I think if there's a fighter in this fight who's going to have the better cardio, that would probably come on the side of Radke. I would say Radke, just based on the way he fights, along with other fighters from VFS, they have a very methodical, cerebral, and tactical approach to the game of MMA, which makes fighters like them very hard to fight because they not only fight to, you know, get the crowd on their side. They fight to win. They don't care if they're getting booed. They don't care if they're behind. They're doing what they need to do to win. And any fighter who does that is a lot more difficult to prepare for than somebody who might just throw themselves, throw caution to the wind and just look to get a finish. I think Radke is one of those guys where he has finishing potential. He can go for submissions. He has good power, big power in his boxing. But the more well-rounded fighter in this fight is Gilbert Urbina. I would probably give the cardio advantage to the side of Radke. I would say midpoint of the second round into the third round, if it gets that far, I feel like it would be Radke pushing the pace, pushing Urbina back up against the cage, over under clinch position, knees to the body, elbows over the top, 1-2, change levels, 1-2 level change, head on the inside single, go back to the body lock, knees, elbows. Radke's not a guy who's going to fight with a ton of excitement. I mean, if you watch the fight against Blood Diamond, it wasn't super competitive, but it was probably more competitive than it should have been, considering Radke was a pretty big favorite. I think minus 300, minus 400. If I'm wrong on those numbers, I'm just kind of going off the top of my head. But he was a very big favorite, and he kind of gave Blood Diamond some opportunities in that fight. And even Blood Diamond was working his way back up to the feet off the takedowns. He was using good cage wrestling, circling back to the center. I feel like if Urbina gets those takedowns, if Urbina gets in the top position, if he gets into the half guard, if he gets into the full mount, if he's able to take the back of Radke, I don't think Radke's going to be able to scramble with the fighter with the not only the well-rounded game, but the jiu-jitsu and submission game of a guy like Urbina. I just feel like he's much more dangerous. He's got good boxing, good kicks. Like we said, hurt Orion Kosei with that front kick to the body. But again, Orion Kosei isn't the best fighter to show how good you really are. And it's the same thing with Radke going up against Blood Diamond. I feel like this fight will show how far these guys can get because I feel like both guys are good in their own regard, even though I would think the more fan-friendly, the higher finishing upside, the more ability to finish the fight does come from the side of Urbina. But Radke is smart. And like we said, anybody like usually out of that VFS camp, you got Ignacio Bahamondes, you have Bilal Muhammad, you have Yair Rodriguez. Like Yair's a very exciting fighter, but those other two I mentioned, they have the potential to be exciting, but they kind of get stuck behind a point fighting style. And I feel like that's what we're going to get from Radke. He has power. He does have knockout power. He has power in his boxing, power in his punches. But the overall game, I just feel like isn't as sharp and isn't as high level as a guy like Urbina. And when I see a guy who has the clear potential to get a finish and a guy who goes for finishes and a guy who's hunting to have the bigger moments in the fight and hunting to get those finishes, I'm going to side with them most of the time. And that's why I'm going to go with Gilbert Urbina. I feel like he's a very solid play in this fight. I wouldn't say to play it by finish because we thought he was going to get a submission in his last fight, but he hurt his opponent to the body with a front kick. So we know that he has power on the feet and a solid and technical Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game to fall back on. So if you're going to play Urbina and you feel like it's a finish, I wouldn't play too heavy to either side. I would just go Urbina inside the distance. I wouldn't play sub. I wouldn't play KO because we've seen he's able to get both of those. We've also seen him get knocked out. He's been clipped on The Ultimate Fighter. He got knocked out by Tresean Gore, but then Gore had some issues and he couldn't make the finale. And then that's when Urbina jumped in against Brian Battle, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. But I do like Urbina here. I just feel like he's more well-rounded. He has more options to win, and he's not going to get caught behind on that point fighting style. It is harder to fight point fighting styles of guys and styles of fighters because, like I said, they know how to win and they don't care if the crowd boos them, that they know what they need to do in order to get the job done, and that does make it for a more difficult fight, and a fight where you have to think a lot more than some other fights where maybe it's just going to be me in the middle and let's throw down and see who gets the job done. Radke is decent. He's well-rounded all around, but I just don't see any certain skill set that sticks out to me, whether it's the boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, or submission game, which would be the jiu-jitsu, sticking out at a higher level than Urbina. And I just see Urbina as the higher level fighter with, like we said multiple times already, the bigger finishing potential. So I'm going to take Gilbert Urbina to finish Charles Radke via a second-round submission. I think he's going to hurt him with a shot on the feet. Radke's going to panic wrestle, and then Urbina's going to take the back and get a rear naked choke. So give me Gilbert Urbina, second-round rear naked choke submission. All right, up next, you have a battle in the middleweight division between Alyaksab Kizriev taking on Mahmoud Muradov. I've been a pretty big proponent of a guy like Muradov. I picked him against Brian Barberena via a finish. He should have got the knockout multiple times in that spot. Could have locked up a submission, but Battle just stuck it out and continued to move forward. Muradov is a guy who will break if the fight isn't going his way. Not right away. He's not a guy who's going to quit on himself immediately. But if he really starts getting pushed back, if he starts getting outstruck, if he starts getting out wrestled, he does seem to be a guy that could break. But I also could see that on the side of the undefeated fighter in Alyaksab Kizriev. I don't think he's a better striker than Muradov. I would 100% give the striking advantage with the kicking and the boxing to a fighter like Mahmoud Muradov. Muradov is a guy who trained under he was one of the only fighters in the UFC. I believe to this day he's the only fighter in the UFC besides, I want to say Jose Aldo might have been sponsored by this team as well, but sponsored by the Mayweather, the money team. One of the only UFC fighters to be sponsored by Mayweather and his team. Sorry, I'm kind of getting caught up on my words here, but Muradov is a very solid striker, good jabs, good 1-2s, decent footwork, uses long, rangy strikes, but really it's the bread and butters in his boxing. He can wrestle, he can shoot takedowns, he does have a submission game as well, but I would say that if you're going to look to grapple and wrestle with a guy like Kizriev, you're kind of setting yourself up for a disaster. I would say the higher level grappler in this fight 100% comes from the side of Kizriev. I think that he's going to be able to get those takedowns. I think he is going to be able to work from the top position and look for ground and pound and look for a finish. But again, these guys who come into the UFC, now it's different with Kizriev because he's been in the UFC and he did get a finish in his UFC debut. So we have seen him compete and he did live up to the hype coming into the UFC. But with these guys who fight on the regional scene, with these guys who fight in another country, with these guys who are just able to run through a ton of people, case in point, there's a couple guys, I would say the one that comes to my memory, at least like the most recent one would be Hussein Askabov. He came in at like 25-0 and ended up losing to Jamal Emmers via decision. Looked okay, but just again, he kind of got fraud checked. We could see a guy like Kizriev get fraud checked here, but because of the big difference in the wrestling, top control, submissions, and grappling, and the fact that we've seen a guy like Muradov get out grappled, get out positioned, get held in certain positions, he will fight off submissions. He is defensively responsible if he does get put in a bad position where the fighter's on his back in a body triangle or where the fighter's looking for a finish via submission. And maybe he could slow down a fighter like Kizriev going into that midpoint of the second round and into the third round, because that seems to be where fighters will fall off the tracks, especially these guys who come into the UFC with the undefeated records. Maybe they haven't gotten tested as much as they should have before they got to the UFC. And once they start to hit that wall, once their game doesn't start to work, once they start to meet that resistance, they tend to break. So we could see that come from a guy like Kizriev, but I just see a big advantage with the takedowns, a big advantage with the wrestling, a big advantage with the top control. And I think this is going to be a second round submission victory for Kizriev. I think he's just going to have a big advantage with the takedowns and wrestling. But if it does turn into a strictly striking matchup and the takedowns don't work, or Muradov's able to, shrimp his hips out, work his way back up to the feet, knee shield, get back off the center of the cage, or get his back off the cage and work back to the center, then I think Muradov wins a striking match. I think he can outbox Kiselev. I think he moves better. I think he moves in and out, and he's a lot faster. So the fighter who's going to have the clear advantage in the stand-up is Muradov. The fighter who's going to have the clear advantage with the wrestling, top control, pressure, ground and pounded submissions comes from the side of Aliaskhab Kiselev. So it's going to be a factor of, do you favor the striker or do you favor the grappler in a mostly striker versus grappler matchup? I'm going to side with the grappler here, but I would not be surprised in the slightest if Kiselev gets fraud checked, because I could definitely see him breaking if he's not able to dominate early and then leading to a late finish or a decision victory for Mahmoud Muradov. But I'm a bigger fan of Muradov, but I'm going to side with Kiselev. I think he's going to get those takedowns. I think he's going to control from the top. I think he's going to exploit an area of Muradov's game that we've seen exploited multiple times before, and I think he's going to eventually soften him up, get his back, and get a rear naked choke. It's either going to be a rear naked choke or an arm triangle from the full mount, but I'm going to go with a second round submission victory to remain undefeated for Aliaskhab Kiselev. All right, up next on the card, we have a very, very high-level women's matchup between Natalia Silva and the number 7 ranked Viviane Araújo in the women's flyweight division. Silva is ranked number 9 and is undefeated in the UFC. Araújo, record of 12-5, 16-5-1 on the side of Natalia Silva. I think that this is a very, very good fight. It's going to be a very technical striking matchup. I think if the grappling is used, it's going to come more on the side of the higher-ranked fighter in Araújo. Araújo has good takedowns, good ability to work to take the back of the opponent, good ability to get both hooks in, look to hunt for rear naked chokes, and just control a fighter if it gets to the mat. I'm sure Natalia Silva has good grappling. I'm sure she has good submissions, but for the most part, she's a karate style of fighter, a traditional martial arts style of striker. Very quick, very heavy, very light on the feet, in and out. 1-2 lead head kick, cross lead head kick, 1-2-3 rear body kick, 2-3 lead head kick. I mean, she mixes up her combinations extremely well, and it's kind of like a more dangerous version of a Wonderboy Thompson. The female Wonderboy Thompson, at least in the way that she approaches the game on the feet, is Natalia Silva. She's going to move in and out. She's going to look to land good jabs, good low kicks, 1-2s, stay on the outside, use the lateral movement, use the angle steps, use the angle shifts, circle out, and just continue to be fighting on the outside and stay away from fighting on the inside against the much better wrestler and grappler. Viviane Araújo can strike as well. She's got good boxing. She can punctuate her combinations with kicks, and she's going to be the much stronger fighter inside the clinch, in my opinion. It's just going to be more of the fact, can Viviane Araújo get a hold of Natalia Silva? Because of that on the outside, light on the feet, in and out style, it's going to be a lot harder to close the distance against a fighter who moves as fluidly and as fluently as Natalia Silva does when it comes to the striking. If it stays a strictly striking matchup, I still believe Araújo can compete. It's just going to be, what range is the fight going to be fought at? If it stays at kicking range, I think we all know that Natalia Silva is probably either going to catch Araújo with a big shot and hurt her, like we've seen she's hurt multiple girls before, and when she smells blood, she will put that aggressive, foot on the gas and come forward and look for a finish. But Araújo's fought the much higher level of competition, and high-level competition always means something, whether it's men's or women's mixed martial arts at the highest level. Araújo fought the likes of Amanda Ribas. She fought the flyweight champion at the current point in time of this recording in Alexa Grasso. Very competitive fight with Grasso as well. Was able to probably score 2 out of the 5 rounds. Grasso coming back, winning all 3 back in a UFC Fight Night main event. But having that high-level competition, it means that Araújo is live in this fight. And for Natalia Silva to be, almost a 4-1 favorite, I do not agree with that. I think at the highest, you might put Natalia Silva minus 225. I think the comeback on Araújo, maybe plus 150, plus 175, plus 200 at the highest. Araújo is a very, very competitive fighter. She's very solid. She's good on the feet. She doesn't make a ton of mistakes. She does get hit, though, and with the speed of Natalia Silva, I think that is going to be a problem. I think the power, the volume, and the overall variety of the striking on the feet is going to favor Natalia Silva in a fight that I believe takes place mostly on the feet, unless Araújo is able to close the distance like we talked about and get into the body lock, get the double leg takedown, get the single leg, and work those takedowns and look to land ground and pound, but more importantly, look to control from the top position and take the back. She's coming off of a big win is Araujo against Jennifer Maia, who's a very, very tough fighter in this division as well. Like I said, the higher level experience and higher level competition does go to the side of Araujo, but I am going to side with Natalia Silva because I feel like if there's a higher finishing upside in this fight, it probably comes from Silva. But if Araujo gets the takedowns, gets the back, jumps on a guillotine, if Silva shoots a bad takedown, I could definitely see Araujo locking up the neck or grabbing an arm and locking up an armbar and submitting Natalia Silva. If you're playing the side of Araujo as the underdog, you probably want to take Araujo by submission. I think Natalia Silva is going to be able to defend. I think she does get caught in a sub at one point. I think she will get taken down. I think she will get put in some bad positions on the floor, but I think she's going to be able to survive for the most part and keep the fight at the distance and range that she wants to, which is at kicking range or just outside of kicking range. And I think we're going to get a decision victory on the side of Natalia Silva. I could see her getting a TKO because of the power she possesses in her hands and her kicking game and her boxing and her kickboxing, and the fact that she's going to be much faster. But I am going to side with Natalia Silva, but I think this is a fight that if you're going to bet, I would say play Silva, but I would not mind a shot on the underdog in Viviane Araujo. But the pick's going to be Natalia Silva to win this fight, 29-28, unanimous decision. Just being the faster, slicker fighter who can dictate the range of the fight. The range of this fight, whether it's kicking range, boxing range, clinch range, that's what's going to dictate who wins this matchup. But I'm going with Natalia Silva to get the job done by decision. Up next in the welterweight division, you have a battle between, it's a rebooking of a fight that we already broke down between Randy Rude Boy Brown and Muslim Salikov. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this fight because you can go back and listen to my breakdown on the last fight card that this fight was supposed to take place at before it got canceled, like the day before the fight. It was either the day before or the day of. I think it was the day of the weigh-ins that the fight got canceled, but Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikov. Randy Brown, we know how he's going to want to fight. In and out, stay on the outside, use his length, use his reach, 6'3" to 5'11". He's going to have a 4-inch height advantage along with an 8-inch reach advantage. He's going to want to keep it on the outside. He's going to want to use his jab. He's going to want to use a lot of circling, lateral movement, 1-2s down the middle, long teep kicks, push kicks to the body, 1-2, low kicks, and try to finish Muslim Salikov, but mainly going to try to, pick him apart over 15 minutes and more than likely win a decision, because even though Randy Brown has gotten finishes in his career, he's more a decision fighter. Like, it's death, taxes, Randy Brown by decision most of the time when you break down his fights. I feel like the higher finishing upside does come from the side of Muslim Salikov. He's got very good spinning wheel kicks, good front kicks, good head kicks, good 1-2s, and I think this is mainly going to be a striking matchup. If anybody uses wrestling or grappling, I feel like it would probably come from Randy Brown trying to close off the distance and maybe get takedowns at the end of rounds to seal the rounds, because Brown is going to be able to dictate if he's able to keep his distance in range. But if he gets into boxing range, if he gets into a range where Salikov can throw big head kicks, big wheel kicks, 1-2s down the middle, then Salikov is very, very live to knock out a fighter in Randy Brown, who has shown multiple times in the past that he's a very, very chinny fighter. He's very chinny. He's been dropped. He's been wobbled. He's been rocked. Even in the fight that he won against Chaos Williams, won it pretty clearly by decision. He got hurt with a big shot, rocked and wobbled. When he fought Jack Della Maddalena, Maddalena was able to close off the distance, put him up against the cage, land a big shot on his chin, and eventually submit Randy Brown, getting his only submission in his UFC career, against a fighter in Brown, where if I thought there was going to be a submission, I would think that would more come from the side of Randy Brown, because we've seen him be able to use submissions in the past. He was able to submit Alex Cowboy Oliveira, I believe, with a rear naked choke. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he was able to drop him and then grab his neck and get a rear naked choke in the first round of their fight. I think Randy Brown is probably the side here, but I would never bet on Randy Brown unless I saw a clear advantage. And yes, he's going to be the longer, rangier fighter. He's going to be the more technical fighter, but he's nowhere near the more dangerous fighter in this matchup, in my opinion. I could see Salikov landing a big head kick. I could see him closing the distance with a big 1-2, a big hook, and hurting Randy Brown, because we've seen him get hurt so many times before. I feel like this fight is a coin flip. The odds were much heavier on the side of Brown the last time they fought, I believe. I think Randy Brown was like -250, -260, and Salikov was over a 2-1 underdog. I don't know what the line looks like on DraftKings, but it says on here that Muslim Salikov's a plus 190 underdog. I would not be surprised if Salikov was able to finish a fighter like Randy Brown, because there's always that risk with that long, tall, rangy fighter where not only does he have the tall man defense, but his chin isn't the best. So there's definitely a possibility where Salikov lands a big head kick, a big punch, and knocks out Randy Brown or drops him and puts him away. Maybe even drops him and submits him. I don't know who to pick in this fight. I don't remember who I picked last time. I think I picked Salikov, but I could be wrong. Um, I'm going to go with Muslim Salikov again. Randy Brown might just pick him apart, keep him behind his jab, the 1-2s, the teep kicks, use the lateral movement, and just pick him apart over 15 minutes and win a decision. But I'm going to go with Muslim Salikov to find the chin of Randy Brown with a big head kick, drop him, jump on him, and get him out of there. So give me Muslim Salikov as the plus 190 underdog to get the job done against Randy Brown via a second round TKO victory. All right, up next in the co-main event of the evening, you have a banger between top 15 fighters in the lightweight division between Renato Moicano taking on Drew Dober. This is a fight where, man, I would not recommend betting on this one because I could see either fighter winning. I could see either fighter getting a finish, whether it's a knockout or a submission. More submission on one side, but I think you know that. You've got the minus 142 favorite in Renato Moicano comeback on the underdog, and Drew Dober is at plus 120. I think that the more well-rounded fighter with bigger variety is Renato Moicano. 100%. I feel like he's the better kicker. I feel like he uses his range and distance a little bit better with his 1-2s. He throws good hook crosses. He puts, punctuates his combinations with kicks, good front kicks to the body, good knees, and he's got a wonderful Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game to fall back on. So if he hurts you on the feet, he can jump on the front headlock, look for a darce, look for a guillotine, spin to take the back, which is his specialty, and look to set up a rear naked choke. Moicano has wins over the likes of Brad Riddell, Kelvin Cater. I mean, the list goes on and on. A very competitive fight with Rafael Dos Anjos, but eventually he was getting dropped and rocked all over the place. But Moicano's not a guy who's going to quit on himself, but he is a guy who has had shin issues and who we have seen get knocked out and dropped in the past. We saw Moicano get knocked out by Rafael Fiziev, but that's one of the best kickboxers on the planet. Drew Dober is more of a boxer than a kickboxer. He keeps his hands pretty high, but he uses a little bit of a slip, roll, and come back on the counter style. Good counter fighter. Very good straight left hand. Uses the right hook to the straight left. The 1-2 right down the middle. A common opponent that both of these men have would be Brad Quake Riddell. Riddell was able to win a decision against Drew Dober, hurting him, rocking him, getting dropped, getting hurt as well, but coming back and being able to have the bigger moments in the fight and win by decision. Moicano picked apart Brad Riddell on the feet, outstruck him where we thought Riddell was going to have the striking advantage, landed good head kicks, good 1-2s, rocked him, wobbled him, and eventually jumped on his back and locked up a rear naked choke to get the submission. So if you look at past fights, you would probably say Moicano's going to win this fight more times than he doesn't. But Drew Dober is a guy where against a fighter in Moicano who has been rocked, who has been wobbled, who can get hit and who can get rocked and doesn't have the best defense when it comes to the striking on the feet, I think Drew Dober is more than live in this spot to knock out a fighter like Renato Moicano. The technique he has in his boxing, the ability to get that outside foot, the right hook, the straight left hand, the 2-3, I think that Dober is more than live for a knockout. But again, the more well-rounded fighter, the fighter with the better wrestling, the fighter with the better jiu-jitsu is going to be Renato Moicano. We've seen Dober get submitted by the likes of Arman Tsarukyan. We saw him get submitted by, or not Arman Tsarukyan. He got submitted by Beneil Dariush, and he got submitted by Islam Makhachev, two of the best grapplers in the entire division. I believe Moicano is on that level of grappling, and especially submission grappling, more than the wrestling. I don't think he has the best wrestling, which might make it a little bit harder for him to get into positions to set up rear naked chokes, to take the back, to lock up the body triangle, to look for arm bars, etc., etc. But if it does get to the mat, it's Moicano all day. Moicano has that jiu-jitsu that I don't think Dober has seen jiu-jitsu at the level of Moicano, but he has seen higher level wrestling in fighters like Dariush and Islam Makhachev. But jiu-jitsu and wrestling are two different things. Wrestling gets you to the ability and the position for you to use your jiu-jitsu, where jiu-jitsu sets up the opportunity to finish the fight. But more than likely, you need the wrestling before you get to the jiu-jitsu side of the game, unless you just catch a good shot on the feet, drop him, and then jump on the submission, or you catch him shooting a bad takedown if he gets hurt and lock up a sub. I mean, there's other ways to do it, but more than likely, you need the wrestling to get to the position to be able to finish with the submission. I think Moicano is a very big liability on the feet with his chin, but I also think Moicano can hurt Drew Dober, because we saw Dober get knocked out by Matt Frevola, a guy who'd never been finished, a guy who's been rocked multiple times but never put away, got finished with pretty much one shot against Matt the Steamroller Frevola, and we saw Frevola get finished with that head kick in the first round against Benoit Saint Denis. But I don't know. This fight's very close. It's pretty much like a 55-45 in terms of who I'm picking in this fight, but I am going to side with the boxing ability of Drew Dober to catch Renato Moicano on the chin. I would not be surprised if Moicano won by submission. I would not be surprised if Moicano got to the back of Dober and submitted him. But I do think Dober has that boxing ability and the technical ability on the feet to exploit some of the defensive holes that Moicano has. But Moicano's striking has gotten so much better. But I don't know. I just see a scenario where Drew Dober finds a pathway for that big straight left down the middle or a big counter right hook. And I think he drops Renato Moicano and eventually TKOs him. The more well-rounded fighter is Moicano 100%, but you can't always go with the more well-rounded fighter. And I think Dober's going to find that knockout shot. So give me Drew Dober as the plus 120 underdog to defeat Renato Money Moicano via a first round TKO. I think he gets him out of there in the first round, finds that straight left or finds that right hook, and puts Renato Moicano away. But again, a fight I wouldn't bet, and I could easily see it going the other way. But give me Dober first round knockout. All right, now we get to the main event of the evening in the UFC middleweight division between the number, what is Dolidze and Imavov? The number 8 ranked Roman Dolidze at 185 pounds, taking on the number 11 ranked Nassourdine Imavov. You have Imavov coming in as the minus 165, minus 170 favorite, with the comeback on Dolidze at around plus 140, plus 150. We know that the more technical striker on the feet, the fighter with more finesse, the fighter with more technicality and higher variety in the striking game is on the side of Nassourdine Imavov. I don't think anybody would discredit that. He's going to be faster, he's going to be slicker, he's going to be quicker than Dolidze, but the power, the finishing ability, the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, the scrambles, that all goes to Roman Dolidze. It's just the fact of we've never seen Imavov get knocked out. We've seen him get pushed back. We've seen him get hit with big shots, but we've never seen him finished. We have not really seen Imavov finish anybody in the UFC. He finished somebody with a brutal TKO from ground and pound. I can't remember exactly who it is off the top of my head, but Imavov does have the striking and the technicality to hurt fighters. We've seen Dolidze go back and forth, go life and death with Trevin Giles and kind of get exposed in that fight. And, Giles is a really solid fighter as well, though, and a guy that I think doesn't get enough credit for how good he is. It's just kind of a durability issue on that side, kind of like a Phil Hawes, but I would say Giles has a little bit better durability than Hawes, but very similar. Hawes, not talking about him in regards to, well, actually, no, we are going to talk about him in regards to this fight because both of these fighters have fought Phil Hawes. Phil Hawes was able to out-wrestle, take down, control, and just out-grapple Imavov to a decision victory, where Roman Dolidze was able to, scramble with Phil Hawes, lock up a sideways knee bar, pop his knee out, where Phil Hawes blew his knee out, got back up to the feet, and then knocked him out viciously with 3 or 4 left and right hooks up against the cage. I mean, knocked out cold before he even hit the ground. But we know that the durability of Phil Hawes isn't the best. But we've seen Imavov have trouble with takedowns, with wrestling, with getting out grappled. And Dolidze may not be the best wrestler in the division, but he is one of the best chain grapplers in terms of looking to set up submissions. Look at the Jack Hermanson fight. Look at the fight against Phil Hawes before the finish. I mean, this guy goes from leg lock to triangle, inverted triangles off of his back, going to leg locks with the Ashigarami game, going back to the triangles, to the omoplatas, to the arm bars, arm bar back to the leg lock. When he finished Jack Hermanson, he put him in a calf slicer and then mounted him in the calf slicer, which didn't allow Jack Hermanson to roll out because his leg was caught in that calf slicer submission. And then he was on the top landing big ground and pound, putting him in basically a defenseless position that led up to a second round TKO. The first round was close. It probably went to Hermanson, but the grappling on the side of Dolidze is so much higher level, at such a higher level than Imavov, that I feel like Roman Dolidze shouldn't be the underdog in this fight. Yes, he's going to be at a striking disadvantage. Yes, he's going to be at a speed disadvantage. Yes, Imavov's going to have the better footwork, the better in and out movement. And he's going to be able to pick him apart if he uses his jabs, his 1-2s, the low kicks, and keeps it on the outside. Dolidze isn't the fastest fighter. He isn't the most technical fighter. He doesn't have the most variety on the feet. But this guy knows how to finish a fight, and he knows how to win. And if there is a finish in this fight, I think it comes from the underdog in Roman Dolidze in the number 8 ranked middleweight. Imavov can definitely win. Imavov might even be able to finish Dolidze because of the speed, because of the power, because of his lack of defense. He doesn't have the best defense, like we said. But I feel like the style of Imavov, it can work over 5 rounds, but I feel like Dolidze is going to be there from start to finish. And with his power, with his jiu-jitsu, with his chain submission ability, his chain grappling ability to go from arm bars to leg locks to triangles, I think Dolidze is going to eventually submit a guy like Nassourdine Imavov. If you look at the striking in this fight, you've got a 3.02 strikes landed per minute on the side of Dolidze to 4.55 for Nassourdine Imavov. You have a 44% significant strike accuracy rate for Dolidze to a 53% striking accuracy rate for significant strikes for Nassourdine Imavov. You have 3.01 strikes absorbed per minute for Dolidze, 3.76 for Imavov. So he lands 4.55, takes 3.76, landing a little bit less than 1 strike more than he takes. Dolidze pretty much even. As many strikes as he lands, he takes. But the significant strikes are higher on the side of Imavov. But the stats aren't that different in terms of breaking it down numerically and statistically. They're pretty close, not in the way that they strike, not in the technicality, not in the technique that they use, but just in overall statistics, they're pretty close, neck and neck in terms of strikes absorbed to strikes put out. And Imavov is higher than Dolidze, but it's barely by 1 strike, just a little bit less than 1 strike output compared to what he takes. And with defense, Imavov 58% striking defense, Roman Dolidze 55% striking defense. The defense is pretty neck and neck as well. I think the biggest difference in this fight is going to be the footwork and speed of Imavov, but the power, the grappling, the submissions, the chain grappling, the ability to look for submissions, the ability to go for sweeps, always looking to get to a better position or looking for a finish. Not like after a while when it's on the ground. The minute it hits the ground, Dolidze's going for scissor sweeps, arm bars, triangles, leg locks, chaining everything together to the point where Imavov might not even want to try to wrestle, because even if he gets the takedown, he's going to be at a constant threat of submissions with Dolidze off of his back. Dolidze is going to constantly throw up subs. He's going to look for strikes. He's going to look for sweeps. I mean, this is a guy who isn't going to allow Imavov to rest if he does get the takedowns. But even with saying that, he doesn't have the highest accuracy in terms of getting takedowns in general, with a 31% takedown accuracy rate. Roman Dolidze actually gets more takedowns at 50%. 1.72 takedowns per 15-minute fight to 1.09 on the side of Nassourdine Imavov. Submission average 1.72. Neck and neck in terms of submission averages statistically, but in terms of actual fight footage and watching fights, we know that Dolidze attempts way more submissions than Imavov in terms of his overall MMA game. This is a close fight, but I'm going to lean with Roman Dolidze. I think over 5 rounds, he can find a way to get into a grappling exchange and submit Nassourdine Imavov. And he might even knock him out on the feet. I could easily see Imavov hurting Dolidze and knocking him out because he kind of is, stuck in the mud in terms of his striking, but he's not inept in terms of his striking. I mean, he's knocked out a ton of guys. Kyle Dawkins with a big knee, Phil Hawes with big shots, ground and pound from the calf slicer position on Jack Hermanson, was neck and neck with Marvin Vettori. A very close fight that could have easily gone to the side of Roman Dolidze because he landed the much bigger shots. It was neck and neck, and Vettori is at the top of the division, or was at the top of the division until he lost to Jared Cannonier and just kind of got picked apart and beat up for the majority of that fight. But I like Roman Dolidze. I like the number 8 ranked Roman Dolidze as the plus 140 underdog. We'll check right now on DraftKings and see where his actual number is. Let's check that right now. Let's see. Hold on, sorry, this is being very slow. The actual number for Dolidze and Imavov right now is probably not going to load for me, of course. You've got Dolidze at plus, let's see. Where is it? Come on. Plus 140 for Dolidze, minus 166 for Imavov. So it's up to date. It's accurate. I think plus 140 on Dolidze is a very, very solid play. But this fight is going to be close just in terms of the overall matchmaking. And I could see Imavov outpointing a guy who's going to be slower in Dolidze. But I like the finishing upside. I like the grappling. I like the chain grappling. I like the power advantage. I'm going to take Dolidze. Give me Roman Dolidze, the number 8 ranked middleweight, to defeat the number 11 ranked Nassourdine Imavov. I'm going to go with I'll go with a 3rd round triangle choke submission. I think he gets into a scramble, catches him in a sweep or something, and then locks up a triangle choke and gets the sub. So Roman Dolidze, 3rd round triangle choke submission against the number 11 ranked Nassourdine Imavov. All right, that's going to be it for my UFC Vegas 85 preview, predictions, and breakdown. UFC Fight Night Dolidze versus Imavov takes place next Saturday. Well, this upcoming Saturday, I guess, a week from today, February 3rd at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. You can get this podcast anywhere you get your audio podcast. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Breaker, Stitcher, and many, many more. It's going to be available with edits on my YouTube channel, which is at the same name as the podcast, at the Touch 'Em Up Podcast. You can support the channel via PayPal, via the link in my description, and you can also subscribe to my Patreon, which is going to have betting articles and betting tips, along with some tape studies if we can get back into the swing of things. I'm your host, Double M, and I cannot wait for UFC Vegas 85, and I hope you're excited as well.